Gotta dust this off. It's been a while since I've made coffee.
She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. She'll put the pressure in your fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes in and goes.
Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for another Coffee and Crime Time. So I know we are in the middle of our Bonnie and Clyde series, but some watchers have expressed that they're missing the straightforward true crime videos, which I completely get. So I'm taking a quick break from the series to deliver you a couple Coffee and Crime Time videos because I want to make sure every subscriber finds something that they want to watch on this channel. So I want to make sure I'm catering to everybody. Also, you are about to witness me taking my first sip of coffee in over a month. No, right under a month. It's been a long time. I've been drinking tea and chai because the caffeine, I was drinking too much of it. So I made coffee for the first time today in a long time. I'm going to take a sip. I chose the small cup today. You know, trying to keep it contained. I missed you. Okay, today we are discussing the missing persons case of Alicia Amanda Stokes, who we will call Mandy from now on, since that is what her friends and family called her. This case is very much a mystery that I would like to see solved. There's a lot to it that adds to the mystery as you get deeper, and there's plenty of theories to discuss in order to hopefully figure out where Mandy could be, or if she's even alive any longer. But before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. Magellan TV is a new kind of documentary streaming service that will leave you feeling both entertained and educated. With over 3,000 of the world's best films and series, documentary films and series, you're sure to find plenty to love about Magellan TV, and they add more to their library every single week. In their new releases section right now, there's some great documentaries that I want to recommend. They're both only 24 minutes. They're easy to watch without having to, set aside a ton of time. But I found them to both be full of great information and insight. The first one is called Till Death Do Us Part, the murder of Judge Patrick Makwabela, and the second one is called Murdered Online. I highly suggest if you already have Magellan TV that you watch both of these, and if you don't have Magellan TV, they're offering viewers of this channel a 1-month free trial so you can dip your foot into the pool and see all that they have to offer. You aren't tied into a contract, you aren't obligated to keep Magellan TV after that 1-month trial. It's just an opportunity to test drive the amazing films and series that Magellan TV has. And as always, I also recommend the Above series, which I know I talk about all the time, but I just watched Germany from Above, the first 2 episodes, and I can't believe how much I love this series, how relaxing and entertaining it is. It's amazing. Best of all, you can watch Magellan TV anytime, anywhere. When you're at home, you can put it on your Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and more. If you're on the go or your family is monopolizing the television, just pop in your headphones and put Magellan TV on your phone or tablet or laptop. It's compatible with both Android and iOS. So whether you're passionate about true crime, history, science, nature, or all of the above, Magellan TV is the choice for you. Thank you so much to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video and being such a great partner to this channel. We really appreciate you here, and let's dive into the video. Mandy Stokes was 33 years old when she walked out of her Oakland, California apartment and vanished. She was 5'3", about 115 pounds. Her hair was brown with blonde highlights and her eyes were green. Mandy wasn't always a California resident, though. She was originally from Asheville, North Carolina, where she lived with her mother, Deborah, and her 7 brothers and sisters. Mandy was the oldest daughter, and she had 2 older brothers as well as 3 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters. It seems when she was younger, Mandy was a bit closer to her father, William, than to her mother. William was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and as a result, he suffered from PTSD and alcoholism, and this put a lot of pressure on his family. I'm not sure when it happened, but it doesn't seem that Mandy's parents were together or married by the time Mandy left North Carolina and started attending college at the University of Utah. Mandy went to college to major in psychology because she was extremely interested in what made people tick and she wanted to understand human behavior better. While researching this video, I came upon many good sources, but there wasn't as much out there on Mandy's case as I expected there to be. Investigation Discovery did a Disappeared episode on Mandy's case, so they have a series called Disappeared, and one of these episodes was dedicated to Mandy Stokes' case. There's also a handful of articles online, and I also found a great interview with Mandy's mother, Deborah, on the Unfound podcast, and I will link that in the description box because hearing that interview gave me a lot of information that was missing from what I could find online. While in Utah, Mandy attended college and she did well, graduating with honors. Her mother said that she was very smart and took her studies seriously. It also appears that while she was in Utah, Mandy got married and then divorced before returning to North Carolina to figure out what she was going to do next. From North Carolina, Mandy eventually moved to California, where she settled down in Oakland, living with a friend of hers from home named Melinda Wiggins. Mandy and Melinda had been childhood friends. They'd spent a lot of time growing up together in North Carolina. So when Mandy decided to relocate to Oakland, Melinda was happy about it, saying they were as close as sisters. Mandy enrolled at John F. Kennedy University in Pleasant Hill to take graduate courses in psychology, and she lived with Melinda, who was also a student at the university. Melinda said at first everything was great. They would spend hours at coffee shops or the library studying, they cooked dinner together, and they kept each other focused on college. But eventually, Mandy began to lose focus on school, even though she'd been getting straight A's and doing well. This most likely had to do with the fact that while she was in California, Mandy's father passed away on December 3rd, 2004. Mandy's mother, Deb, felt that it had been hard on Mandy because her father, William, had always been important to her. But because of his issues with alcohol, he wasn't always the most responsive or reliable parental figure. But Mandy had always wanted a closer and more concrete relationship with him. She obviously hoped that he would get cleaned up and become the father that she wanted. But when he died, that possibility went away. According to Melinda, after William's death, Mandy turned to alcohol and men to deal with the pain. In 2008, Melinda told the East Bay Times, quote, she was self-medicating and she had a lot of guy friends because she needed the attention, end quote. Others in Mandy's life at this time noticed her behavior as well, including a man who worked with her at a Piedmont Avenue bar where Mandy worked as a cocktail waitress. This gentleman's name is Paul Vitsky, and he said Mandy was a nice girl, always professional at work, but when she was off the clock and she had a few drinks, it was a different story. Vitsky told the East Bay Times, quote, she knew she was an attractive girl. She could go up to a guy at a bar and get him to buy her a drink. End quote. Vitsky also commented that Mandy had told him that she was seeing multiple men around the San Francisco and Oakland area, and that she was also romantically involved with a man who lived in New York City. Vitsky said that Mandy would bop around a lot and was always checking her cell phone. He said that it seemed as if she'd had goals, but somewhere along the way, she got distracted. The close friendship between Mandy and Melinda Wiggins, her friend in Oakland, was strained due to Mandy's drinking and her ongoing depression that Melinda did not know how to help. Things became worse between the two women when Mandy's 28-year-old brother Erin moved to Oakland and started crashing on their couch in the spring of 2007. Erin Stokes had an issue with drug addiction, something that apparently his whole family knew about, and it seems like his drug of choice was heroin. I'm not sure who made the decision, whether it was Mandy or Melinda, but after 3 months of these living arrangements, Mandy and Erin moved out of Melinda's and got their own apartment at 595 Merritt Avenue in Oakland. When their mother, Deb, was interviewed by the Unfound podcast, she claims she had her reservations about this, knowing how Erin had overstayed his welcome with others before, including family members, other siblings, and friends. About Erin, Deb said, quote, it was one thing after the other, trying to hold a job down, staying with whomever. I didn't think it was a good idea from past history, end quote. But Mandy and her brother Erin were close, and Deb believes that Mandy felt she could help her brother even as she struggled with her own demons of substance abuse and depression. It didn't seem that Erin had changed his ways, however, or that he was ready to be helped. Mandy would sometimes let Erin use her car, and she was finding unpaid traffic tickets in the glove compartment. Erin was using her vehicle, getting these parking tickets, and then not telling her about them, which became a huge financial burden for her. Mandy had some money saved for tuition, but she didn't have a ton of extra spending money, and this was an expense she could not afford. And Mandy did, in fact, have a boyfriend in New York. His name was John Crew, and the two had met while on vacation in Vegas 2 years before her disappearance in November of 2007. And for the 4 months before she went missing, they'd become very serious, even though their interaction was mostly long distance apart from trips planned to see each other. Mandy planned one of these trips in October of 2007, and at some point before she flew to New York, Mandy discovered that her brother Erin had been using her checkbook to write checks to himself that he would then cash from her bank account. She was obviously very upset and stressed out about this, so she planned to stay in New York with John for a full month to give herself some space and distance. At this point, Mandy was not employed, and she had decided to take a semester off from school. And according to her mother, Mandy was not planning to remain in Oakland very long. In the episode of Disappeared, it's alleged that Mandy was going to be moving to New York City to live with her boyfriend because she loved the city so much. They had a great time. While they were there together, Mandy and John saw the sights, they went on camping trips, they did some shopping. Mandy had even called her mother from New York City and was like, hey, can you talk me out of buying these boots, these leather boots that I saw in the shop, because I really want them, but I know I can't afford it. And her mother was like, don't buy the boots. And Mandy was like, okay. But then later she called her mother back and admitted that she'd gone ahead and bought them, which is a situation I have found myself in many times. Whether or not Mandy was planning to eventually move to New York City isn't completely clear, but according to her mother, Deb, Mandy was planning to return for Oakland, only for the specific reason of packing up her things and moving to Atlanta, where her mother lived, and then moving in with her mother. Deb said that Mandy was considering a move to New York, but she didn't really know what she wanted her next chapter to look like, and the decision-making, faced with all these different paths that she could take, it was kind of stressing her out. Mandy also told Deb that she really didn't want to go back to Oakland. But Deb can't remember if her daughter cited a specific reason for this. She only remembered that Mandy had mentioned maybe having her brother Erin, who lived with her in Oakland, pack her stuff up for her so she wouldn't have to go back. But Deb told her, she didn't think that was really going to work out, and Mandy should just go back to her apartment, tie up all her loose ends in Oakland before heading to Atlanta. So I already told you that Mandy had an issue with alcohol, but there are some reports that she may have been taking other drugs, although Deb couldn't or wouldn't say for sure what those drugs might have been. Deb mentioned that she thought maybe Mandy might be taking pills, but there was never any concrete evidence of this. However, Mandy's alcohol addiction was so bad, she'd been put on a medication called Antiabuse, which was the first drug approved by the FDA for treatment of alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence. So Antiabuse is not considered a cure for alcoholism, but it's supposed to act as a deterrent because if you're on this medication and you ingest alcohol, you will get very sick. Antiabuse works by interrupting the metabolic process of alcohol in the body. So when you drink alcohol normally, your body metabolizes that alcohol into acetylide. And this is very toxic to the body, and it causes a lot of the hangover symptoms you'll experience after a night of heavy drinking. So your body is supposed to turn that toxic substance into acetic acid, which is harmless, but Antiabuse stops that from happening, which means the bad and toxic stuff remains in your body. It doesn't get transformed into something that's harmless, and it results in a buildup of acetaldehyde in the body that's 5 to 10 times greater than the body would normally have after drinking. So essentially, it makes you feel horrible, and this is supposed to make you think twice about drinking while on the medication. So if you're on Antiabuse and you drink alcohol, the negative side effects start about 10 minutes after the alcohol is ingested, and they can last for over an hour. Some of the side effects experienced are flushing, nausea, copious vomiting, sweating, thirst, throbbing in the head and neck, chest pains, low blood pressure, dizziness, trouble breathing, heart palpitations, loss of consciousness, a feeling of being uneasy, weakness, vertigo, blurred vision, and confusion. Now keep in mind, we know Mandy was prescribed this medication, and usually people are only prescribed this medication when their condition is really bad. But we can't be certain she was taking it because She hasn't been found yet, so even if she's no longer alive, her body hasn't been found to do an autopsy and see if it was in her body at the time of death. But if she had been taking it, she would have been advised that while on Antiabuse, you have to avoid all alcohol. You have to be very careful because even a small amount of alcohol hidden in food or something can cause these effects. And if the person decides to stop taking the medication, they're told to avoid alcohol for up to 2 weeks after discontinuing use because the effects are still possible. While Mandy was in New York with her boyfriend John, it's unknown whether she was drinking. I haven't talked to him personally, so I can't ask. But John was aware of her bad relationship with alcohol, claiming that both he and Mandy noticed that after a few drinks, she became a different person. So after spending a month away from Oakland, Mandy returned on November 20th, 2007, just 2 days before Thanksgiving. 5 days later, she would disappear, and no one has heard from her since. But on the day of her disappearance, November 25th, some interesting things happened. Mandy's mother, Deb, says that on the morning of the 25th, she received a call from her daughter very early in the morning. So she said that in Atlanta, where she was living, it was still dark outside. With California being 3 hours behind Atlanta, it was most likely somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning when Mandy called Deb in California. Which suggests to me that she may not have gone to bed that night, but there was someone else in the apartment who was awake and also part of this phone call, her brother Erin. Mandy asked Deb to tell Erin that she loved him, so Mandy told her mother Deb that Deb should tell Erin that Deb loved him. And according to Deb, she did try to talk to Erin, but it seemed to her as if he was on something. He was very agitated. And when Erin got off the phone, Mandy told her mother she didn't know what to do for him because he was acting very strange. And she asked her mother if maybe his Kundalini had been activated. So apparently, Kundalini is the ultimate life force inside of us all. According to Medium.com, once this energy is activated, it is felt like liquid fire, electric, timeless, paralyzing. Now, this kind of conversation might seem odd to you and me, or, maybe not to you, but to me, because I don't talk to people about this stuff on the regular. But evidently, this was not a strange conversation for Deb and Mandy to have, since they often discussed metaphysical things. And although Deb suspected that Mandy had also been dabbling with drugs at some point, during this conversation, Mandy seemed fine and didn't appear to be on anything. After talking for a bit, Mandy told her mother that she was leaving the apartment, and Deb asked her to call back when she could, but Mandy never called back. After getting off the phone with Deb, Mandy called her ex-boyfriend, who is still in Utah, and she told him that she was concerned about Erin and the way he was acting. Mandy also said she wanted to help Erin, but didn't really know how. Obviously, we can't understand what was going on in that apartment in the early hours of November 25th. We can speculate that Erin was behaving in a way that was not normal. Maybe he told his sister that he felt his family had turned their backs on him because of his drug use, and he felt unloved, which is what prompted Mandy to call Deb so that Deb could reassure Erin that she did in fact love him and he was loved. Either way, whatever was going on between Mandy and Erin did not end there, because early the next morning, so it's actually the same morning, right? It's like between 2 and 4 in the morning in California when Mandy calls Deb with Erin on the phone. But then later that morning, still November 25th, another resident of their apartment complex witnessed Erin and Mandy outside arguing. So the eyewitness left to go to the airport and saw the siblings, Erin and Mandy, outside the building, but they were on the ground floor, like outside the front door. When this eyewitness returned from the airport, Erin and Mandy were still in the same spot and they were still arguing. At some point, the argument escalated, and it's reported that Erin had Mandy sort of caged in, and she was seen sort of like faking him out, lunging one way so that he would block her from that direction and then spinning around and running in another direction. And it was perceived that Mandy was trying to get away from Erin. At that point, she ran up the stairs to her apartment, he followed her, and nothing was heard from them after this. According to Erin, he and Mandy were arguing about a few things. He said that Mandy had confronted him about the checks he was writing from her bank account. She also told him that she was planning to move to Atlanta to live with her mother, and she wanted him to leave the apartment. I'm not sure if he meant leave the apartment that same day, like get out now, or if she was letting him know that since the apartment was in her name, once she left, he could obviously no longer live there. Additionally, it's often mentioned that the two of them were arguing about family, but it's never elaborated any further, and this could mean a lot of things. In my experience with drug addiction, and I do have somebody very close to me who struggled with the drug addiction for many, many years, the addict is usually paranoid that everyone hates him or he's disappointed the people he loves, and he begins to feel very isolated from his family and his loved ones, which actually makes the addiction worse because these are negative feelings and the addict will continue to use in order to escape from those negative feelings because they no longer have coping skills. And that obviously only makes everything worse. So Erin did talk to his mother later about what the argument had been about, and I guess it was mainly about Mandy leaving. At least that's what he said. And he asked his mother, what are you going to let her move in with you in Atlanta? She's on drugs. How are you going to handle her when she's on drugs? Things like that. But mainly, according to Erin, what the neighbors saw was, quote, a little tiff about our family, end quote. If what was seen outside the apartment building was a continuation of the discussion they'd been having much earlier that morning, it does tell me that emotions were running high on both ends, and this wouldn't be something that could be resolved quickly. Usually when an argument lasts for more than, 10 or 20 minutes, when it's going into the hours, or when the same argument keeps popping up again and again, this is because there's things that haven't been resolved, and it's just not going to be okay until you actually sit down and talk it out and resolve them. So we've got Mandy and Erin earlier in the morning between 2 and 4 a.m. He's acting strange. She calls her mother. And then this argument outside the apartment complex allegedly went on from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. After Mandy and Erin were seen running back into the apartment, we don't know what happened after this. We only have Erin's version of events. According to Erin, when they got back inside, he jumped into the shower, and at one point while he was in there, his sister told him that she was going out to run some errands, and he shouted, "Love you," from the shower. When Mandy left, he said she was wearing running pants and carrying her car keys, cell phone, and wallet. She also had her iPod on her. She walked out of the apartment, got into her black 2001 Honda Accord, and drove away. Now, the most obvious theory is that after arguing outside and running back into the apartment, the argument continued inside and grew violent, ending with Mandy injured or dead at the hands of her brother, and then he just made up a story and said she went out for errands. So I know that's what a lot of people think about this case. And for those people who think that, I hear you, right? Erin's looking pretty good for this, and it gets worse, but we will discuss that further in a moment. Because although Erin was the last person to see Mandy, he apparently was not the last person she talked to. At about 10:45 a.m., after she'd left the apartment, allegedly, Mandy called her boyfriend, John, telling him that she and Erin had argued about money and about her moving, and she wanted to know if John could fly her to New York. Later, John would tell police and reporters that although Mandy had been fine when she was with him in the city, when she returned to Oakland, she fell apart. John said, quote, "She definitely had a complete mental breakdown. She was extremely upset," end quote. John also mentioned that he believed Mandy had been suicidal the Thursday after she left New York, which would have been Thanksgiving. And although John had been concerned about Mandy and her mental state, he'd figured she'd be okay. He never knew that she would go missing. It is once again never specified what Mandy said or did that would make John feel she was suicidal. Hopefully he was more specific in his statement to the police, but I always have a hard time taking these secondhand sorts of assumptions about somebody's mental or emotional states. What one person might consider, suicidal behavior might just be them overreacting or being really emotional or venting or blowing off steam. So I don't want to take his word on it just from him saying, I think that she was acting suicidal on that Thursday before she went missing. If there was more corroborating evidence where he gave specific indications of what she was doing, what she was saying, did she actually hurt herself, things like that, that would be supporting evidence for me to buy into that. And I'm sure if he had that, he gave it to the police, but I don't have it. So I'm not going to, consider it a fact. So as Mandy was talking to John on the phone, he claims he believed she was in her car, even though she never explicitly said that she was. John felt that it sounded like she was. And, we understand what the difference is between talking to somebody on the phone and then maybe talking to somebody when they're driving in the car or they're on Bluetooth. They sound more far away. You hear like background noises, car noises. So I believe him that he thought she was in the car. However, at some point in the conversation, mid-sentence, the call was cut off. And less than an hour later, at 11:20 a.m., Mandy's phone was shut off too. It's unknown whether the phone's battery died or if it was turned off by Mandy or someone else. Mandy's mother continued trying to call Mandy all day, but she never picked up and no one ever heard from her again. So the next day, Monday, November 26th, Deb spoke to her son Aaron, who informed her that Mandy had not come home all night. Deb told him to call the police and file a missing persons report, but when she spoke to Aaron again later that day, he told her that he'd tried to, but he'd called the wrong police station or he'd called the wrong number. So Deb called the Oakland police herself and reported Mandy missing, which prompted them to send a few officers over to Mandy's apartment so they could investigate. Deb was on the phone with Aaron when the police showed up, but when they asked if they could come in and look around, Aaron told them no. Now, this is my issue, and it's always nagged at me. Before I listened to Deb's interview, I didn't know for sure whether the apartment was in Mandy's name or if Aaron was also listed on the lease or the rental agreement. I assumed that Aaron must have been on the lease, or else he would not have had the legal right to prevent police from entering the apartment. But then Deb confirmed for me that it was only Mandy's name on the apartment. So why did the police take the first no and leave? Why didn't they insist to come in? Why didn't they have him show proof that he was legally allowed to bar them from entering and conducting a police investigation? Why didn't they get the landlord or the building manager or something to kind of insist? They were just like, no? Oh, okay. Bye. Additionally, many people believe it's suspicious that Erin refused to allow the police in. And I agree, but we are dealing with a drug addict here, and we have to keep that in mind as we go through the events that makes Aaron look as if he had something to do with his sister's disappearance. Somebody deep in the throes of a drug addiction, they won't always behave in ways that make sense to you or I. They make decisions, and they do things with basically one goal in mind: to not let anything get in the way of their using. It's very possible that there were drugs in that apartment at the time the police arrived. I'd go as far as to say that there definitely were, because remember, Mandy was out of town for like a month. So Erin was probably using the apartment as if, she wasn't going to be walking in the door any moment. And it's also very likely that Erin would not want the police to discover the drugs because they might take the drugs or maybe arrest Erin for using the drugs. If Erin is telling the truth about the events of November 25th, he knew that Mandy had left the apartment unharmed and there was nothing for the police to find in the apartment, so he would have been more interested in protecting his drug habit, not getting arrested for possession of heroin. He would have been more interested in that than helping the police find his sister, especially if he thought she was just taking some time and he thought she was alive and well. Apparently, it was not unusual for Mandy to just pick up and go on a trip with friends on a whim. So he might have been feeling that letting the police in wouldn't have helped find Mandy, but it would land him in some hot water. But the police could have insisted, right? They could have done something. They could have gotten a warrant, got the property manager, but they didn't. They just left. 2 days after she went missing, Mandy's car was found, but not by the police. Mandy's car had been abandoned on Park Boulevard near Lamart Boulevard, and this is apparently next to a pretty large ravine, and I think that it's the Fern Ravine, but I can't be sure. Well, at the time it was towed, the company claimed that the car was out of gas and had a dead battery, but other than that, it was in good working condition and had no mechanical issues. So maybe Mandy ran out of gas and tried to walk to a nearby fuel station to get some. Well, that's not very likely, considering that all of her belongings were found in the car on the seat, including her wallet, her cell phone, her iPod, and I don't see her walking to get gas without at least her wallet, right? Now, depending on what you read and where you look, this sort of area of the case is reported differently. Some people say that the car was locked. Other sources say that the keys were in the car. I'm not sure. I would say, though, that more sources report the car was locked when it was found. So that does make sense, and that does add up with the theory that she ran out of gas or her battery died, and, she had to walk someplace to get gas, or maybe somebody picked her up, and then she would have obviously locked her car before leaving. There's also a theory that the car could have been left on when it was abandoned, or at least had the headlights left on, and that's why it ran out of gas and had a dead battery. And I feel like this is more likely since the odds of running out of gas and having your car battery die at the same time are pretty slim. That would be the worst day ever. That is some Mercury in retrograde shit right there, for your battery to die and for you to run out of gas like at the same time. But the strange thing is, it appeared as if the car hadn't really been parked, right? It wasn't pulled over to the side of the road as if somebody was coming back to it. It had been left kind of in the middle of the road. So a few weeks after Mandy went missing, Deb, she flew to California, and her and some volunteers were in the area of the ravine where the car was found handing out flyers. And they were approached by a man who lived nearby and who had seen them and heard them talking. Now, this man claimed that he suffered from short-term memory loss, and as a result, he made a habit of writing everything he saw in the general area down in his journal so that he could remember. This man claimed that he had seen a black Honda Accord blocking traffic for 2 days, and he went inside his house and brought his journal out to Deb to show her the diagram that he'd drawn of this car. Now, the short-term memory loss journal guy, he claimed that the front of the car was pointed towards the ravine and the car was sort of at an angle, not pulled off to the side, but right in the street. He said he'd seen it parked there Sunday and it stayed there for 2 days until it was towed. Now, where this man claims to have seen the car, which he'd drawn a picture of and gotten the make and model and color of Mandy's car correct, it was not where the police claim it was towed from. The police say that the car was further up Park Boulevard next to a church, not where the journal guy claimed it was. But then again, the police were not the ones who towed it. They only recovered it from the tow yard after Deb tracked down the car details through Mandy's insurance company and got the Oakland police to issue a BOLO on the car. So they could have gotten inaccurate or incorrect information from the towing company. Or the guy with the journal and short-term memory loss was incorrect as to where he saw the car. Maybe it wasn't Mandy's car at all that this man saw. It's just one more piece of the puzzle that doesn't really fit. During the investigation, the police dug into Mandy's cell phone and bank activity. Mandy's mother, Deb, was told that the way Mandy's phone had pinged off cell towers made it seem as if she'd spent some time that morning before the phone was shut off, driving in circles around her apartment. The police also claimed that Mandy's phone never pinged at the location it was later found, which was a little over 2 miles away from her apartment, which means that her phone died before she left the general vicinity of where she lived and drove to wherever her car was found by the ravine. This is a little detail that has also bothered me because if my phone died, I probably wouldn't go on any kind of car driving trip, even just to run errands or just to drive around and clear my head without making sure I had a charger or without charging my phone up a little. I just wouldn't feel safe to do that. And the whole thing is very interesting to me because the timeline doesn't really make sense. Mandy is on the phone with her boyfriend at 10:45. He claims the call was disconnected mid-sentence, and when he tried to call her back, she didn't answer. But the police don't have Mandy's cell phone turning off until 11:20, roughly 35 minutes later. Did Mandy drive around the block where her apartment was, not wanting to go back inside, purposely not answering John's calls after the call got disconnected? Did the call drop because she drove through an area that didn't have service? Did her phone circle her apartment building before, after, or while she was talking to John? Was she talking to John from 10:45 a.m. to 11:20 a.m. and the call being cut off was because her phone was shut off or died? It was also revealed during a search through Mandy's bank activity that her debit card had been used after she was last seen, which gave her family and friends hope that she was alive. Now, it seems that this activity was a mixture of purchases from a convenience store, also ATM withdrawals. On the day she went missing, there was activity on her bank account at 11:28 a.m., and this activity happened 3 blocks away from her apartment. There was activity again at 11:51 a.m., and this happened 5 blocks from where her car was found. It was also reported that there was activity again the next day. In the episode of Disappeared that covered Mandy's case, they pretty much just say that it wasn't Mandy making these transactions. It was Erin, and they know this because of the cameras attached to the ATM machines. However, Mandy's mother, Deb, claims that the ATM cameras captured both Mandy and Erin on the morning of the 25th. separately, though, not together, and she doesn't specify whether it's the same ATM. I'm assuming it's not. She also doesn't specify whether it was Erin at the 1128 ATM, whether it was Mandy at the 1155 one. But if it's true, what she's saying, it's very odd. That would mean that there was either 2 copies of the ATM card or 2 ATM cards that had been linked to the same bank account, or Mandy and Erin had been together at some point after he claims she left the apartment and he never saw her again. Either way, when all of this was discovered, the Oakland police brought Erin in for questioning. Keep in mind that at this point, they still have not gotten into the apartment to search it because Erin has still not given them permission to do so, permission that they really don't need. According to Erin, the Oakland police interrogated him for 9 hours on December 12th. And obviously, they're doing this because his behavior in the hours and the days after his sister disappearing is very odd, and it's red flags all over the place. Using her debit card and her checkbook, Erin had essentially drained Mandy's bank account, and this was money that had been there for college. I think in the show Disappeared, they said it was something like $6,000 or $7,000. During this interview, or interrogation, as Erin would call it, police claimed that Erin was cavalier, uncooperative, unemotional, and acted as if he didn't want to be there. Erin claims that he tried to help them, but the detectives were railroading him and accusing him of killing his sister. So at this point, this case is changed from a missing persons case to a homicide case, as police began to believe that Erin had taken his sister's life after an argument, even though he vehemently denied any involvement. Due to the change in category, police were finally able to get a warrant and enter the apartment that Mandy had shared with her brother. But weeks had passed, right? Erin had already moved out. Mandy's family had already been in there to pack up her things, and the new tenants were about to move in. So it's obviously not a fresh crime scene. Even so, the Oakland police alleged that they found 2 areas in the apartment where biological evidence was found, and it looked as if someone had tried to clean up this biological evidence but had done a bad job of it. Once again, the Oakland police never refer to what they found as anything more specific than biological material or biological evidence, but according to the Biological Evidence Preservation Handbook, biological evidence refers to samples of biological material, such as hair, tissues, bones, blood, semen, other bodily fluids, things like that. I just said the word biological so many times. From the way they described this biological evidence, saying that it looked as if someone had tried to clean it up, I'm thinking they found blood, but once again, that's never been verified. However, they did confirm that they found this same biological material in Mandy's car as well, just one spot of it. So there's 2 areas in the apartment where they found this biological evidence and 1 area in Mandy's car, but they don't say where. It's going to give us a lot more information if we know if that biological evidence was found in the trunk or in the driver's seat. We'll have a better understanding of what exactly happened. Mandy Stokes went missing in 2007. She has never been seen again. There's been no activity on her bank account or with her social security number. Her car was found, allegedly locked, parked on a street with her personal belongings inside, an empty gas tank, and a dead car battery. What happened to Mandy? Where is she? At this point, Oakland police believe they are looking for a body, and they do not believe that Mandy is alive. It is made very clear during the Disappeared episode that the police suspect Erin Stokes, Mandy's brother. But when they brought it to the district attorney, he concluded that they did not have enough evidence to prosecute. So let's consider Erin's possible involvement. He had a bad drug problem to the point where he'd caused a rift between himself and some of his family members. Before moving to Oakland, it looked like he'd been living with a girlfriend, a long-term girlfriend, I think in Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, but some other state. Something happened with that situation, which prompted him to search for a new place to live. He ended up living with his sister, but he had a drug habit to finance, so he began stealing from her, a fact that she soon discovered and confronted him with. Erin and Mandy are seen having a heated argument. It looks as if Mandy's running away from him and he pursues her, but then everything's fine, even though they've been arguing for hours at this point. And Mandy goes to run some errands, but not before her brother shouts out that he loves her from the shower. Mandy did not return to their apartment that night or the next day, so Erin mentions this to his mother, at which point she instructs him to call the police and report Mandy missing. But Erin did not report Mandy missing. He claims that he called the wrong number, which is something I don't understand. I know you can directly call the police department, right? You can look up their numbers and directly call, but most people just pick up the phone and dial 911, and that gets you to where you need to be. What wrong number did he call? Was it verified with the police that he even attempted to report her missing on Monday? So, did they go in his cell phone records and see that he called a number that morning, but it was the wrong number? In my opinion, I don't think he did. But that doesn't mean he's guilty of killing his sister, because like I said earlier, we aren't dealing with a person who is in a normal state. If what Deb says is true, that Erin was seen using Mandy's ATM card the morning she went missing, he most likely had gone out and purchased drugs, and he was too busy locking himself in the apartment and doing the drugs to call the police. And if he did call the police, they would obviously want to question him, and in his state, or with whatever he had in the apartment, he wouldn't have wanted that. The fact that Erin had been stealing money from his sister and continued to do so after she went missing is certainly a red flag that might suggest he had some involvement in what happened to her. But once again, a drug user's main motive is to do drugs. As far as I know at this point, Erin was not steadily employed, and he wouldn't have had the funds to support his drug habit without stealing from someone. And stealing from Mandy was just convenient. But how did he get her ATM card if she had her wallet with her? I suppose that he could have stolen the card earlier before she went missing. He might have swiped it from her wallet the day before, or even several days before. But then how was Mandy seen on camera using that same card that same morning? Like I said, it might have been a different card and a different bank account altogether. That's never been made clear. Additionally, Erin claimed to have taken a lie detector test at the police station, but that has also never been confirmed. It's something that he told his mother to kind of show her how he was being cooperative with the police. But the Oakland police were very clear in the disappeared episode that Erin was extremely uncooperative from the start. Another strange fact is that after Mandy went missing, a friend of hers found Mandy's diamond stud earrings stored in a little box in Erin's coat pocket. If we were dealing with a non-addict, all of these things would look very suspicious, but there's no proof that Mandy was wearing the earrings the day she went missing, and after the police put a stop to Erin using Mandy's bank account, he could have just been going around the apartment looking for things that he could pawn for money. If Mandy left her apartment alive that day, which does seem to be the case since we have her boyfriend John saying that she called him, and I'm sure the police have already kind of cross-checked the time and the length of the call with her cell phone records. And if the data from her cell phone showed that she circled her apartment building that day, or at least circled the general area, how could Erin Stokes possibly have been responsible for whatever happened to her? Now, I don't want to say it's not possible. I think it is possible. But I think a lot of things would have to go right for Erin in order for it to be possible. So what if she did leave her apartment that day and she was circling around the apartment complex, but then she came home? So after she talks to John, after she circles around, after her phone dies, she goes back to the apartment and they continue arguing. And that's when it happens. That's when he kills her. And then he waits for it to get dark. He puts her body in her own car. He drives it out to this area where it was found. It's kind of like the middle of the night, so there's not a lot of people around. He can't really see where he is. So he just leaves the car there with all her stuff in it, gets out, locks it, walks away. Or maybe he even leaves the car on, hoping somebody gets inside of it and steals it. I mean, it's Oakland, California, after all. Car theft isn't an uncommon occurrence. But like I said, this is a lot of speculation. There's no proof that Mandy returned to her apartment, but there wouldn't be, right? Because her cell phone died. And nobody could get a hold of her all day because her cell phone was turned off or dead. Now, a working theory at the time was that Mandy had decided to take her own life. She'd been feeling more and more depressed. The anniversary of her father's death was right around the corner. I believe it was a week after she went missing that the anniversary of her father's death was to happen. Mandy had come to California ready to take on the world. She did well in school, but then things changed. She wasn't focused. She stopped going to college. She began drinking. She may have been using drugs. Those who knew her felt it was evident her mental state was not good. It's theorized that she may have driven herself to where the car was found, got out, and just tossed herself into the ravine. I don't believe this theory at all. The police did search the area around where her car was found, but her body was never discovered. When her boyfriend John was interviewed in 2008, he believed that Mandy had been suicidal at the time of her disappearance, but her brother Aaron, who is now the #1 suspect in the eyes of the public and apparently the Oakland police, he didn't believe that at all, at least at the time. In 2008, Erin said, quote, "Personally, I don't think that she did. There's a part of me that thinks she's very much alive and knows what's going on. I don't think she committed suicide," end quote. Erin also said that Mandy had never made threats of suicide in his presence, and he couldn't even think of anyone who would want to hurt her or cause her harm. I feel like if Aaron had done something to his sister, he would be grasping at any straw, right? Grasping for anything to explain what had happened to her as an out. He would, in my opinion, he would have jumped on this suicide train and rode it away as quickly as possible from person of interest station. But he didn't do that. As suspicious as a lot of his actions looked, they can easily be explained away by him being a paranoid drug addict who wanted to stay as far away from the police and law enforcement as possible. But we could just as easily look at this another way, right? Aaron was using drugs quite heavily, it seemed. And this didn't seem to be something that Mandy was happy about. Deb even said that Mandy had once approached a local drug dealer and demanded that he stop selling to her brother. If Mandy was somehow standing in the way of her brother's addiction, he might do anything to remove that roadblock. Mandy leaving Oakland would have certainly put a crimp in his lifestyle. He lived in an apartment she was paying for. He was stealing from her to buy drugs. If she left, where would he live? How would he buy drugs? But if she just wasn't around, he could stay in the apartment at least for a while, and he could use her money to buy drugs. A reasonable person would think, well, how long is this going to buy me? Eventually, I'm going to get evicted when the rent doesn't get paid, and eventually the money Mandy had saved is going to run out. But drug addicts don't really think in the long term. They think about how they can get their fix today, right now. They're not thinking about what's going to happen next week or next month. He may have been so messed up on drugs that he didn't care about his sister's life. He just wanted to make sure he could keep using. Nothing else mattered. That doesn't mean that Aaron didn't love his sister, but they say when you're into an addiction really deep, the drug becomes your family. The drug becomes your spouse, your best friend, your children, your mother, your father, the most important thing in the world. Now, I did speak to somebody who struggled with a heroin addiction for a very long time and has since been rehabilitated and gotten completely off of it and would never look back. But I wanted to know, is it possible when you're on drugs for you to kill a family member? And he said, well, heroin is different. It's not like cocaine where you're all hopped up. Heroin, it's like you don't want to do anything. You just want to sit there and pass out. It makes you very chill. However, he did say that if the user is going through withdrawal and there's somebody standing in the way of them getting their fix so that they don't have to go through withdrawal anymore, because apparently withdrawal from heroin is incredibly physically painful. It's just torturous. You want to avoid it at all costs, right? So they don't want to feel that way again. They can feel the withdrawal coming and they're like, oh, I got to do the drug so that I don't have to feel this way. If somebody was standing in the way of them getting the drug so that they would stop going through withdrawal, the person I spoke to believes that anything is possible. That a drug addict in the grasp of withdrawal, trying to get his drugs so he doesn't have to go through withdrawal anymore, he would be capable of anything. The person I spoke to, who struggled with a heroin addiction for a long time, he also said that as an addict, if you've got your stash and somebody gets rid of it, they think they're trying to help you and they're like, oh, we're not going to do this anymore, and dumps it in the toilet or throws it in the garbage, that this would make an addict snap and become violent. And I just have to imagine the kind of scene that Mandy walked into after she was in New York City for a month. Her brother, who is actively using heroin and maybe other drugs at this point, is in her apartment alone for the last month. And he probably trashed it. Now, Deb, Mandy's mother, said that she went into the apartment to pack Mandy's stuff up, and she even went in there before packing Mandy's stuff up just to visit with Erin. Deb said that Mandy usually kept her apartment very neat, very organized, very tidy, and when she went in there, it was an absolute madhouse. It was a mess. So Mandy walks in after being gone a month, and she sees maybe Erin passed out on the couch. Maybe, there's drug paraphernalia all around him. Maybe his drugs are right there on the table because he doesn't know when she's coming home. And she takes his drugs and she gets rid of them. When he wakes up, he's angry and he's still thinking about it several days later because now she's onto him that he's stealing from her. So she's obviously hiding her purse and her checkbook from him. She's gotten rid of the drugs that he did have, and he doesn't have a way to get more. And he's going through withdrawal. So this is definitely a possibility. And what about Journal Guy from the ravine? The man who suffered from short-term memory loss and wrote everything down so he wouldn't forget, he lived very close to where Mandy's car was found. He heard Deb and the others talking about Mandy and putting up flyers, and he offered to help them by giving them information on the car he saw that he thought was Mandy's car. Now, we know that oftentimes the perpetrator of a crime will try to force himself into an investigation, and that's kind of what happened here. Deb said that even after she went back to Atlanta, this man was in contact with her, and he would call to talk about Mandy or to give Deb some wild stories about what was happening in Oakland. Is it possible that this man had something to do with Mandy's disappearance? Or did he see something that he just forgot and didn't write down? Or is he just a completely innocent, good Samaritan trying to help? And lastly, I do want to discuss the possibility that Mandy did encounter foul play, but not from anyone she knew. Oakland is not the safest city in the United States. In fact, it's been on the top 10 list of most dangerous U.S. cities for several years. In 2020, an article was published claiming that Oakland residents have a 1 in 16 chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime or a property crime. And Area Vibes, a crime-ranking real estate site, created a poll for Oakland residents. The poll asked, how would you rate the amount of crime in Oakland? About 61% of those who responded answered, awful, crime is rampant in this area. The second question asked, do you feel safe walking alone at night in Oakland? Of those who responded, 59% answered, not safe at all, I never walk alone at night. On top of that, Oakland happens to be an area that has a big human trafficking problem. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, California has the highest human trafficking rates in the United States, with the Bay Area being a hotspot. There is this film that was made called Surviving International Boulevard. If you can find it, check it out. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description box. And International Boulevard in Oakland is also called The Blade, and it's notorious for human trafficking. The FBI has referred to San Francisco, right across the bridge from Oakland, as one of the world's major sex trafficking hubs. Not one of the United States' major hubs, but one of the world's. San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose all have international airports, which makes it easier for traffickers to move their victims in and out of these different airports, in and out of states, in and out of countries. December of 2019, Lieutenant James Beer, who heads up the Oakland Police SVU unit, said that trafficking is an issue they've been dealing with for many years and it's not getting better. Beer highlighted many reasons why Oakland is a trafficking hotspot, including the fact that they're a port city, and Oakland is also an area with a high incidence of poverty, which makes young victims vulnerable to perpetrators that promise them money and a better life. Now, we've discussed the epidemic of human trafficking in a few different videos, and I'll link them below if you want more information, more specific examples. But it's a real issue in Oakland and many other cities and small towns alike around the world. This is not an Oakland problem or a California problem or a United States problem. It's a human problem, and every one of us should want to see it come to an end because there's currently 25 to 40 million people trapped in modern-day slavery, whether they were chosen for forced labor or for the purposes of the sex trade. They are tortured, helpless, and powerless every single day of their lives. And it's not going to stop because the trafficking of human beings is incredibly profitable for these douchebags that take part in it. Human trafficking earns profits of roughly $150 billion a year, and $99 billion of that comes from commercial sexual exploitation. Even though this is so prevalent, and it happens around all of us every day, the number of prosecutions of human traffickers is extremely low. Estimates suggest that internationally, only 0.04% of human trafficking cases are identified. And that means, obviously, the majority of them go undetected, unpunished, and the victims are not helped. Let's look at this through the lens of Mandy's case. She has an argument with her brother. She leaves the apartment to call her boyfriend, most likely because she didn't want Erin to hear her talking about him, right? She gets in the car and drives around for a little bit while she chats on the phone. I've done this myself. When I used to live in an apartment or in close quarters, if I wanted to talk on the phone in peace without someone listening or it being loud, I'd get in my car and drive around the general area because I have no destination in mind, so I'm just driving in circles. So the phone call with John drops. It could be very possible that her phone died because she'd been up all night dealing with Erin, and when do we usually plug our phones in to charge them? Overnight while we're asleep. It's very possible that she was on the phone with John until the 11:20 time when her phone was shut off permanently. I don't have access to the police records, so I can't say for sure. But I obviously believe that the police would know whether Mandy was on the phone with John that entire time or whether she hung up and then her phone died or turned off later. If the call dropped, maybe Mandy was just so upset and stressed out, she didn't feel like picking up when John called her back because she'd asked him to fly her out to New York, and his response had been to tell her to calm down and call her mother. So maybe she hadn't heard what she wanted to hear in the call, and she just didn't answer when he called back. Sometimes you're so upset you just don't want to talk to anybody. Then she decides she isn't ready to go back to the apartment, so she starts driving aimlessly, and maybe her car runs out of gas or the battery dies, which is why it was parked so strangely in the middle of the road, not pulled off to the side. So she has a phone with a dead battery. It's of no use to her, but hopefully she can flag someone down and use their phone or catch a ride somewhere so she can come back for her car later. Mandy was described as being very friendly, very open, and a little naive, right? She was from the South. She took that Southern hospitality thing very seriously, and for the most part, she simply trusted people. So she's sitting in her car, which is parked in a very awkward position. She gets out. Maybe she starts to wave at passing cars for help. Let's say the person who ends up stopping for her isn't a good person. Mandy was a very pretty woman, so an individual or more than one person who's in the business of trafficking might have seen her and thought, this is the perfect opportunity. So he pulls over to help. She asks to use his cell phone, and he's like, yeah, sure, get in. I'll drive you to where you need to go while you make that call. And just like that, within the space of a few moments, Mandy goes from standing free on the side of the road with her whole life in front of her to being a prisoner who has no chance of escape. Is this what happened? Of course, I don't know. But I would say that it's more than possible, especially considering that the area, including the ravine, were checked and her body wasn't found anywhere. So there's no proof that Mandy's actually dead. It's just assumed she is because police never found a body and she never popped back up anywhere. But if she was the victim of human trafficking, she wouldn't really be popping up anywhere, would she? Or if she was just the victim of a random, brutal killer, she wouldn't be popping up anywhere. I know Erin is the main suspect, and I completely understand why. But if he'd done something to her in the apartment, how did she call her boyfriend from the car? And if Erin had killed his sister, why would he have driven her car to a pretty busy area and left it there? Why would he even have told his mother that Mandy didn't come home on Sunday? He could have avoided his mother for days or even weeks. I mean, his family was used to him dropping off the map. And when she was finally able to speak to him, he could have said, well, I didn't know that Mandy was missing. I'm on drugs. I'm out of it. You know this. I don't even spend a lot of time here. Most of the time, we're just passing ships in the night. I had no idea. Maybe she went on a trip with her friends. I didn't know. Erin could have just been like, Mandy's a grown-up. I'm a grown-up. I didn't know it was my turn to watch her. And people probably wouldn't have believed him, but they don't believe him now, so what's the difference, really? I also do want to mention that it seems fair to say the Oakland police believe Erin had something to do with what happened to Mandy. They said as much in the disappeared episode. In fact, they seem very perturbed that they aren't able to bring charges against him because the district attorney doesn't think they have a case. And to be fair, with what we know, they really don't. At least not one that could or should go to a courtroom. They only have circumstantial evidence. They have no physical evidence, which they might have gotten had they pushed the issue of getting into the apartment, but they didn't. They might have been able to accurately process a fresh crime scene and get much more physical evidence than what they have. But I also want to point out that I don't know what the police have, but I do know they most likely have way more than what they've shared with the public. So I don't want to proclaim from the rooftops that Erin Stokes is innocent because it doesn't look as if the police feel that way, so maybe they have something more concrete that allows them to be so sure. But once again, on the other hand, it's not as if we haven't seen law enforcement get tunnel vision on one suspect only to find that the suspect never had anything to do with the crime. That's happened. We know it has. So I'd want to know if they'd gotten access to Erin's phone records, if they were able to see if he left the apartment that morning, and if so, where he went. Was he ever in the vicinity of where Mandy's car was left? We know he went to an ATM to take money out of Mandy's bank account, but did he go anywhere else? Does he have an alibi for when she went missing? Was he on the phone with someone? Was he paying a visit to his dealer? Or was he at home alone? I also would like to know how deeply the police looked into the short-term memory loss dude with the journal, because Deb says she gave the police all his information and passed on what he told her, but at the time she gave the interview, she'd not followed up with them about it. I mean, I'm not saying that journal dude did anything, but he did live right there, right? He lived right by where Mandy's car was found. He was a little odd, and I think it wouldn't be a big deal for the police to at least ask this guy if they could check his house, maybe bring in some dogs to see if they could find Mandy's scent in there, just to get a better idea of how he connects to Mandy Stokes and her case. But as for now, that is all I have for you. I really would like to know what you think about everything in the comment section. Now, Erin obviously feels uncomfortable. He doesn't like the way the disappeared episode portrayed him. And I mean, I agree. They definitely didn't give him any benefit of the doubt. And I'm not saying that they have to, but I'm just saying if you want to, put forth a case to people and kind of let them try to figure out what happened, you should probably give them all the information. And I don't think that was done. And, there was a lot left out about Aaron Stokes. But right now he feels like everybody looks at him and sees a murderer. And he is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And until the police have enough evidence to bring him to that court of law, probably nothing's going to happen there. And if Mandy left that apartment after she talked to John and never came back to the apartment, I don't think it's possible that Erin was involved. But if she did go back to the apartment, I think it is possible. But once again, we don't know this stuff. I don't even think the police would know for sure at this point since her phone had died. And so there was no way to really see what her movements were after that 11:20 a.m. time when her phone died. But let me know what your theory is. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Please don't send hate to anyone that we talk about in these videos. I hate that I have to say this, and I feel like it's even pointless to say it because the kind of people who would send hate and harass somebody that's talked about in these videos isn't the kind of person who's going to listen to me if I say don't send hate. So it just feels pointless. But yeah, don't track Aaron Stokes down and, accuse him of being a murderer and send him mean messages. Like, it's pointless. Like, let this man live his life until he has been brought up in front of a judge and jury. And then they can be the ones to decide. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to like the video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check the description box for a link to my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host with retired police detective Derek Levasseur. New episodes come out every Friday. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.
The bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say I Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood